Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
All right, man, so we're on. Hey, listen, we're going to try an experiment here, a little social experiment, Joe. We put a guitarist and we put a drummer in a room together, small room, and we're going to see if they can survive for 2 hours. You got any odds on that? You a gambling man?
I am a gambling man. Not heavy, but a little bit. But I think this is going to work out just fine.
I think we're going to be okay. Yeah, there's plenty of things to throw at each other if we do indeed go that route, though. There's plenty of stuff to pick up and throw. I would watch the lava lamps so they get a little warm. That's all.
Dude, I really can't believe this plays.
Oh, fucked up it is. I get all kinds of reactions from people that come in.
Really something else.
Notice he didn't say cool. He said it's something else.
Well, and here's the crazy part. Like I've seen enough of your podcast.
Yeah, right on.
To know what this room looks like.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. And then you actually physically walk in. And it's like it just punches you in the face.
Sensory overload.
It really. I mean, but not just sensory overload for the sake of
sensory overload.
Right. It's still there is still a rhyme or a reason to it. It still makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Really, really cool.
Thank you, man.
Really cool.
Yeah, it's just it's eclectic, it's fun. It's the backdrop, you know, the line that we give people, and it's more than a line, is that this is the backdrop for the show. It isn't about the show's not about the studio, it's about the guest, of course, but we wanted cool optics. We wanted something cool and
presentation.
Yeah, you know, it's got to be interesting, right? And the video was always important to us. We just didn't want to do an audio only podcast. That space is pretty crowded,
right, and
clouded.
Yes, it
right
is.
now.
Yes, it is.
So hey, thanks for coming on.
Hey,
I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
No, I don't know if you know this, but we've talked a lot off camera, but I started out on the drums. I think I mentioned that too.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And the funny thing was I visited Joe a while back, a month or two ago. Got to meet his real cool dog, Remo. There's a photo on social media about that.
Yeah.
But I thought I still had it, you know. Now, I haven't picked up drumsticks and, you know, I don't know. I still know how to hold them still in the traditional grip.
Yeah.
And I went down, he let me sit on a kit, and it didn't go real well. I stood up after about 2.5 minutes like, I don't remember anything.
Yeah. But I
did it.
It takes a while.
Oh, yeah, man.
It takes a while.
I can still do all the rolls and the accentuation. I mean, if I had a snare in front of me, I can do that.
Sure.
But it's playing a kid is a whole different animal.
It is, and it takes time, and it's funny you bring that up right now because I'm teaching more now, you know, via Skype or Duo or whatever that is, and I'm teaching a little bit with a couple of students in my basement, who still are willing to come over, you know, provided everyone's wearing masks.
Of course,
and that's really, really interesting. Doing more teaching now with COVID and going through all the remedial stuff about playing drums that I haven't touched on.
Paradiddle.
That, okay. And
pull that to you a little bit.
And all the, no doubt.
Just a little bit. There you go.
And all the permutations of that, of a paradiddle, let's say. Sometimes when I took a long time not teaching anyone, you forget all that remedial basic stuff in drumming. And it's a slap in the face when you start teaching again, and you need to remember it because you need to teach it. Right. And it is super valuable for a young drummer. All that kind of stuff.
Flam.
All of that, right?
It's all coming back to me now.
Yes, flams and whatnot. Teaching, if you're doing it in a fun way, in a way that's engaging for the student, it's every bit the learning experience for me as a teacher.
Really?
Oh, crazy. Absolutely. But in a good way, though. That's and I've not been a teacher a lot of my career, but I started getting into it like 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
And had started to get interest from students, and now I'm, you know, and then COVID hits. I start teaching a bit more now, and I tell you what, with the right students, it's really cool.
I bet so. And a lot of instructors tell me that they get double benefit from teaching. Number one, certainly it's a supplement for income. It's a business. But the other aspect is it's the best form of practice for you, the instructor. Am I right?
Yeah. And again, on the remedial end, you're not going to be doing any crazy stuff that you're working on yourself.
But you do that anyways.
Right.
On your own.
That's my own practice time.
Right on.
But there's so much stuff that I worked on in the first 2 or 3 or 5 years that I played drums.
Yeah.
That is good stuff to work on.
Okay.
And then it's like, I don't know.
Why do we move away from the fundamentals?
Right.
In life we do.
Yes. And it's almost like, okay, I did that already. Or I've moved past it. And it's like, no, you want to at least spend some time doing some of that stuff.
Right.
Some of the first stuff you learned. Make sure it's still fresh and ready for your own purposes and ready for your students.
With guitar, it's always scales. Go back to scales. Sit on the couch.
Well,
do chromatic scales to all the acid in your hands, cause your fingers to be numb.
Oh man, that's crazy though.
That's scary to think that we don't. And I know people that learn to play, as I'm sure you know, and they think they know it all, and they go back and do their rudiments. You actually, folks, in drumming, you call it the rudiments, right?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of rudiments.
Yeah.
Big one for me is the 6-stroke roll. I use that a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Use that a lot on the kit. But to me, I try to take all of those rudiments, all of them, and play them all over the kit and try to teach students to get away from just playing a snare drum, which is that's a marching thing, and that's awesome that those guys do that. I never got into marching drums whatsoever. I was never in the band in high school, never went to college for music, nothing. I just played and played and played and played and played. So, when I have students now, they know rudiments.
Right.
And I do too. Pretty well,
maybe,
but
you did at one time.
Oh, absolutely, no question. But I want to apply them all over the kit and make them make them applicable, make them into a rhythm for them to learn and apply in a standard situation, maybe with a band or whatnot, and make it really, really useful. So I do a lot of that with students, and it's working really well. I gotta tell you, I'm really enjoying teaching. It's crazy.
Before we head down this rabbit hole, because I'm sure we're going to go there, just talk to me a little bit about the pandemic. Where were you in your career and activity and gigging when you heard? I use the reference, Joe, that it was a slow-moving train. And I got a lot of guests that laugh when I say that, but it was like this big train coming. We saw it coming, didn't want to believe it, and then boom, it was here. So where were you and how did that hit you?
We had done a couple of shows with Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors.
Right.
We had, I forget how many shows booked, 45 or 50 shows booked for 2020. We were just so looking forward to all these gigs that we had, and then, and I can remember texting back and forth with the band, and these texts going back and forth, just depressed. I think this is real, and I think this is going to be maybe more than just a couple of weeks. And we're keeping in touch, obviously, and we're doing as many projects as we can. These videos that you see on Facebook that we do, that's better than nothing. We've gotten together in a couple of different socially distanced get-togethers and played, but how we're dealing with it, we're all realistic enough to know and objective enough to know that there's no easy way around it. It's a drag. It's a drag for all of us, and it's not just for the canceled gigs. It is that, but it's also not being able to hang out with those guys and not being able to work and create. And for us, we're playing mostly original music,
right?
Supporting an album that we did a couple years ago, which is really, really cool, and we wanted to keep on doing that.
Right.
And, you know,
there's a momentum there as well too, right?
Oh, no doubt. And I have this new drum kit that I have now from Sonar. I want to play as much as I possibly can, and it's over. You know, so.
What are you hearing right now? So as we never dated these shows until the pandemic, so we give a rough date here. We're at the beginning of August. What are you hearing from your other musicians? What are they feeling? What's the vibe they have in terms of when we're going to return in Pennsylvania?
Man, I hate to say this, but I think the most optimistic thing to say is spring of 21.
Okay.
That's the most optimistic thing I've heard. Now, I'm not talking about small shows where you might go and do like an independent gig somewhere with not a lot of people in the audience and distance between the music. I'm not talking about that. Those kind of gigs, smaller gigs, could still happen. And I've actually done one or two already. I play with Juan and Erica Vasquez, and we do covers, and those guys are great at doing a ton of different cover tunes. Really, really good. So I played with them just playing cajon. But those are smaller gigs, you know.
Right.
A lot of outdoor stuff at wineries and stuff like that. Gigs like that are soon or will hopefully continue. Much safer. As far as the Sun King Warriors playing a gig like the Blue Heron Festival up in New York that we play, or playing Stage AE again, or the Palace Theater in Greensburg.
Right.
Any of those kind of shows.
It's going to be a while.
If I were guessing, I think we're looking at like being able to have 1,000 people in a relatively close area. When is that? End of 21, beginning of 22?
Yeah.
Spring of 22?
Yeah.
Now, of course, this is all just a guess, but big shows for spring of 21? I hope.
Yeah.
Of course I do, but I wouldn't bet $1 on it.
No, and it's been, and our state in particular has been very interesting to watch. And I was listening to another podcast last night, and on subjects that we don't cover here, which was very politically based. But the one nugget,
thank God for that.
Yeah, one nugget I pulled out of it though, which caused me as I was out walking last night, it caused me to think, and that was that depending on which direction the country goes for an election for president may depend on how long the pandemic lasts. And I said, wow, if that really is true, that's really fucked up. It should be science-based, right? It should be, come on, let's hope it doesn't go that direction. But it's like, I just wonder if it's, philosophies will affect that. And artists are entertainers, are people who perform, musicians, comedians, the theater.
Yeah.
That's a whole segment of society that if we lose that, if we really lose touch with that, there are consequential damages ahead.
No doubt.
And we talked a little off air about these, and you mentioned it earlier on, these Zoom calls, and there's so many creative ways that the musicians primarily are getting together, even virtually, to put music together. So y'all are trying. But wouldn't you agree, if we lose the arts, especially the performing arts, we're going to lose a big part of society? It needs to come back.
It needs to come back in one way or another, and I'm sure there's going to be adjustments made for it to come back as much as it possibly can online and in Zoom meetings and all that. That's great. And with these videos on social media, I love them. It is definitely better than nothing. But is it enough to replace a real show to go and see the Eagles at PPG Paints Arena, which I did a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was. There's nothing that replaces that. A gig like that, if those kind of shows never come back, or shows in theaters, a good friend of mine is the drummer for Hamilton, the show. When's he going to work again?
That's a good question.
Good
question.
Without that, it's the therapy of it. It's music and those types of shows. It does something that only music can do with regard to therapy and lifting people's hearts and making people connect that is so beyond this petty political crap that we listen to. We can't avoid every day. If we lose that, we lose the therapy, we lose the entertainment, not to mention the revenue and all the ticket sales and everything. Man, we got to figure out a way to get past it, and hopefully, I mean, the sooner the better. I don't think it's anything that's going to happen real soon. I think we've got, again, if it's spring of 21, excellent. Where we can have a big show again.
Yeah.
Or,
that's literally right around the corner.
It really is. It's going to be that fast. And shows like Hamilton, I mentioned that because of my buddy. But
sure.
Yeah, all those kinds of shows, if they happen in spring of 21, I think that's as good as we could expect.
Right.
Right. How fast is all this stuff going? It's already August. How scary is that? Think about that part. It was the end of March when this all went down, and we've discovered, we're in the middle of this, and things are going to start shutting down.
Right.
That was already the end of March.
No, right.
It's August already.
Yeah, time flies. There's no question. Your circumstance is a little different than the folks I want to talk about in a second, in that you have a full-time career. You're an executive in your firm, so you have that. Not that music is secondary to you, because when I think of drums and you playing out and rock and roll, I never view that as like a secondary part of your life. You're immersed in it, but you've got two full-time loves there.
Yes, I do.
So this may not be particularly directed at you, but obviously you know plenty of musicians in your stable, that folks that perform out. You're working musicians. You're working giggers, right?
Yes.
You're doing working gigs. These people are shut down right now. I mean, how hard is that?
A lot of people are, they're collecting unemployment, and that obviously helps for bill paying. But again, the therapy. If I don't at least play drums, and going and doing a gig, going and doing a show, if I don't at least play a little bit in my basement, if I have to, I start feeling funny. Start feeling achy, like when you haven't been to the gym for too long, and your muscles start feeling funny, like your body is telling you, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to be in the gym. You're supposed to be behind your drum kit creating. You're supposed to be working.
Right.
And when you don't, something happens inside of you that isn't good. And that's what this is. It's, again, I keep coming back to this word, therapy. Music and performing, it does something to you. Like after a great show, which I'm lucky because most of our shows are really, really just awesome. At the end of that show, you might be unhappy that you have to pack up equipment, but you're loving the fact that people in the room have responded and want to talk to you.
No question.
And
no question.
At that moment, right after a gig, there's sort of like an afterglow there, where everything is right in the world, and my triglycerides are not too high. You know what I mean? I'm feeling super healthy, and that's like the perfect moment. You lose all of that with this, and it keep talking about like unprecedented. It is unprecedented, but this is a different reason why. Man, losing that high that you get from performing for people and connecting with people, it's tough to not have that.
I bet. And I always thought too, with drummers, it's a little bit different. When I would play like a charity gig or something, and we really would go at it, and for me, not being a regular working musician, so if I'm up there an hour with that thing slung over my shoulder, playing Zeppelin, playing that type of music, after an hour, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And I used to come off that stage and say, wow, that's like the most amazing workout, but you can't explain that if someone doesn't play, because they just don't get it, but there's something unique going there. But I always thought that drummers really had just that times 10, because of the real pure physical nature of how you play the instrument.
I would agree. And it's physically demanding, especially depending on how hard you're playing, and how dynamically you're playing. In the Sun King Warriors, it's mostly aggressive, and I'm driving the band. Jim Donovan's a drummer, and he hired me, and so he's he has an idea.
Stuff's written in that with that framework, right?
Absolutely, and what a great deal for me to be in a band, playing for a drummer who's leading the band.
Right.
It's awesome.
It's a hell of a compliment.
It is, and I get this question a lot, like, well, how do you're in a band with a guy who's leading the band who's also a drummer, isn't that an issue? I'm like, no, it's quite the opposite. It really, really works well, because Jim's very accomplished.
No
I mean,
question.
what he did with Rusted Root is
Right.
insane, and we're still hearing the commercials to this day, with Send Me On My Way, Raisin Bran and
Right.
Enterprise Rent-A-Car commercials and all that. It's wild. It really is. So
God love rock and roll.
yeah, no doubt. So and we still perform that song too, at our shows. But getting back to that, it's an honor to be hired by a drummer who has done the Dave Grohl thing and come out from behind the kit and has these songs written.
Right.
Is putting this band together. So talking about drumming being physically demanding, I mean, we in our band, the drumming is driving it.
Okay.
We, Jim and I both, we don't want mushy drums. No, we want the 2 and the 4 to be driving, and a lot of 1 and 3 with the kick drum. Like we want the drums to be at the forefront, and we have Lee run in front of house for us, and he understands that, and it's just been awesome, because I've not been told yet. Can you imagine this? A drummer not being told, "Hey man, you're playing too loud." I can't remember. I've been playing with the Sun
That's
King
a
Warriors
rarity.
for 5 years already. I've not once seen or heard, "Hey Joe, you're a little too loud." Whereas every
That
other
never happened.
every other gig I've ever done, it's been an issue. So it to get back to what you're saying, drumming it's very, very physically demanding. But again, there is the physical demanding part, but there's the therapy that comes along with it. And at the end of a show, I am beat and I will sleep very well afterwards,
Right.
but I'm feeling great.
Yeah.
I'm feeling great. No aches and pains, if it's a circulation thing or whatever it is. That works out really, really well. And, I just can't wait to get back to gigs again. Any kind of,
Yeah.
but a big Sun King Warrior show again, just chomping at the bit.
That'll happen.
It will.
That'll happen.
It will.
One more thing about drumming too. If you key on the word organic, to me, the most of modern instruments and modern players, outside of singing, which is all organically driven, of course, but drumming is so visceral. It's so, to me, it's so organic.
Caveman-like.
Very much so. Do you see why we have trouble dealing with these people? You
Caveman-ish.
uncivilized bastards.
That's me.
The guy
Proud
in the
of
back
it.
making all the noise, the uncivilized guy in the band.
Yeah, proud of it. Beating on things with sticks.
Yeah, but I mean, do you see how people get there? They get there. It's so like I don't know. There's a part of it that's striking. You're striking something, and depending on how hard you strike, it depends on the flavor of what you're doing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so organic, though.
It is, and when I was a young drummer, not so much because I was just beating the living daylights out of my drum kit at all times. It's not until you start playing some jazz and some jazz fusion, and even then, once you get a little older, you start learning that you have this whole palette of sounds with the drum kit, depending on how hard you play. And man, when you're young, there's only one speed. And man, like that, and to me, that is it's like a visceral kind of thing, and it's very organic, and that to me is also where it comes into like, all right, what are you listening to? Who are your influences, and what kinds of music are you listening to?
Right.
And if you're listening to music that's constantly just bashing,
right,
then you're going to emulate that just naturally. But if you're getting into...
Well, this is a good segue. Let's go back to the beginning for you.
Sure.
So when did you pick up your first drumstick?
I would say it was 4 or 5.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom and dad, they, it was a common story. They got me the Mickey Mouse drum kit, with the paper heads. There's a picture somewhere.
And you went full Keith Moon on it, right?
I did. I did. Well, the way I played them, but I didn't throw anything across the house, or knock anything over, because I think in the back of my mind, I really wanted to make sure that maybe a few years later, they'd buy me a nicer drum kit. You know what I mean? So I wasn't too violent, but I played them, and by the time I got to be 8 or 9 years old, I still wasn't taking lessons. And my mother, finally said, like, "What are you doing? Like, you need to take drum lessons." And I agreed. Had she not done that, I might not have even started. Very possible. I just wasn't motivated enough at that age. I was kind of just floating.
Okay.
Now, when my mother at 9 said, "You're old enough now, you need to take lessons," and at that time, Babe Fabrizi was teaching at Fabrizi's drum shop in Wilkinsburg.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in Wilkins Township, Monroeville area.
Right.
So we heard great things about Babe, and I started taking lessons. So I took lessons from him. And Derek Edwards was teaching there as well at the time. Okay. So this was late 79 and most of 80. Mm-hmm. So I was taking lessons from those guys, and I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I took lessons.
Who were you listening to at that time? Like, what were the first drummers that caught you?
Well, you're talking 79, 80, 81. So right then, definitely Neil Peart. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the guy, especially at that time. Mm-hmm. Neil Peart. I listened to Liberty DeVito a lot with Billy Joel at that time, and Steve Smith.
Okay,
was a huge one for me.
Okay,
because right around that same time was Jean-Luc Ponty.
Oh yeah,
Enigmatic Ocean.
Oh yeah,
that was Steve Smith.
What an album!
A killer, and. It was at that moment, I guess at that age, I kind of thought like, oh, you have to be in a rock band, and that's it, and work really hard and hope that your rock band does well.
But who pushed you into the average kid in 80 is not going to find Jean-Luc Ponty.
Yeah, well, I have my dad to thank for that.
Okay.
My dad was, not a musician, but a very musical person.
Okay.
And he brought me that Jean-Luc Ponty album, Imaginary Voyage, I think it was.
Wow.
And that had, I'm not sure that had Steve Smith on it, but it was the same kind of vibe.
Absolutely.
So I got both of those albums, and with Steve playing on it, which is amazing because he's a Sonar guy,
right?
And just like I am, and,
right.
and now I get to. I could go for hours, but Steve Smith was, at the first time that I ever saw a drummer like him being a killer jazz guy and playing for Journey.
Right.
He's the guy who played on Open Arms for crying out loud.
Right.
So he was, able to be a super popular pop drummer,
right,
making money, but also doing this crazy jazz
I wonder if
stuff.
I wonder if him and Neil Sean had conversations, because Sean was doing the same thing. He was crossing over.
No doubt.
Jazz style guitar.
And, I know for Steve, it's just that he wanted his portfolio to be really wide and wanted the experience of playing with. But Steve's been a killer jazz player all his life. But in Journey, I know, Neil wanted a drummer of that caliber too, and not just a rock drummer.
Yeah.
And there you have it. So that having both, that affected me from the moment that I started playing for real at 9, 10, 11 years old.
So were you buying Modern Drummer then?
Yeah, was
that exposing you to other people in different genres?
Yes, and that really helped a lot. And
Dave
then
Weckl and
Dave Weckl and Vinny Colaiuta.
Yeah,
okay,
right
those are really the guys. And Vinny Colaiuta's a Pittsburgh guy,
absolutely.
Brownsville, close enough. Getting turned on to all those guys it's huge, and this is something I tell my students. It's like, look, you don't have to love the music, but listen to it. Listen to a really wide variety. It's going to help you. It's going to help you develop. And it'll even make, let's say you do become a rock drummer only. It will help you to make your rock playing deeper and more profound if you have a jazz background too. Latin, right? Bossa Nova, all this salsas and all that. It'll give you a whole different flavor, and it'll make your groove be a bit more convincing and a bit deeper than just a guy who plays rock. Now, I have no problem with the Tommy Lees of the world who are just rock drummers. That's awesome. Me, I'd rather have that super wide palette and be able to play a blues thing and shuffles and jazz and rock and all that.
Gadd, Steve Gadd.
Yeah, that kind of thinking, being able to do all of that. And all of those guys, Steve Gadd, Dave Weckl, Vinny Colaiuta, Omar Akeem, all of those kind of drummers, all of them are really good at every style we just mentioned, and 15 more.
Right.
And that's the difference. To me, that's the difference between them and your standard drummers who are more rock guys or
was
whatever.
Smith the guy who sent you down the rabbit hole as a young person? The reason I asked that question is, for me, Dee Miola was kind of the guy who sent me there. Having an uncle who was a rather accomplished drummer in Pittsburgh, I knew that side of it. So Steve Gadd, Lenny White, going back and finding these amazing, and then following their careers, their solo stuff, and you be playing Lenny White's solo album in 1996, and people were looking at you like you're insane. Like, who the hell is that? Meanwhile, you just. My whole take was, you just don't understand.
Well, yeah, they don't. They don't.
Or Billy Cobham, just the most amazing thing you could hear. Like, just, oh my God.
Just listening to it and being open to it.
Spectrum blew my mind.
Yeah, and there's something that goes off inside of your brain, like, okay, this is what's humanly possible now. You didn't know that before, and then that makes your practice and your abilities widen a bit now, because when you practice things, you're thinking about that crazy stuff that you saw Billy Cobham do. Lenny White is another one.
Lenny's a badass, man.
All those guys. Tony Williams and Vinny Colaiuta. I mean, Vinny's, you
can't forget Peter Erskine.
Yeah, I mean, you go down the rabbit hole of YouTube videos for these kinds of guys. More modern guys, Jojo Mayer, Thomas Lang, these kind of guys. And there's a million more that I'm forgetting, but you get my point. Like, these guys are stretching it,
Oh, no doubt.
And it's nice to see a lot of young drummers today. I have to give YouTube some credit on this. It allows young drummers to see all of these killer players now.
Same thing with guitarists.
Same thing with guitarists.
Same thing.
No doubt.
If you seek it out, it's there.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
When you were going down those rabbit holes, and I'm guessing you were 13, 14, 15 years old, right?
12. Because I stopped taking lessons from Babe. But then when I was 12, I started playing a ton because I was starting to get calls from neighborhood kids to play drums. So at 12, I started playing a ton. It just, something clicked, and I just never stopped playing after age 12.
Did you think that there was something odd with you, and I mean odd in a kind way, in that you were seeking out things that were not hip and cool and in with what your compadres were listening to at the time, whether they were music kids or not? Yeah,
well, I was lucky. I was always playing with musicians who were 2 or 3 years older than me, which helped me a lot. But they all liked this stuff too. They all liked Nick DeBattiste is my brother-in-law, great guitar player. He loved Jimmy Page and Mike Stern. He loved Al Di Meola and big rock guitar player
Angus
guys.
Young.
Loved Angus Young, but loved Pat Metheny too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so
absolutely,
and he's 2 years older than me, but so then I started loving Pat Metheny,
American Garage changed my life, man.
Crazy, just so damn good, and with Danny Gottlieb and all those guys.
Yeah, Lau Mays on the keyboard.
Oh,
He's
Lau.
lost him too.
Yeah,
He's lost him.
It's just a shame. Lau, that was a big loss. But being open to all that stuff and being aware of it, it changes your musical life. Right. So all my musicians who I was playing with, they all loved that stuff. So if anything, I was a bit of a geek, before I started playing drums, and that made me a bit cooler with my classmates at school. But all of the musicians I was playing,
pre-hipster.
Oh, no doubt. This is 1982, But all the musicians I played with all loved jazz and jazz fusion the way they loved rock, and we played it all, or tried to play it all.
Yeah.
So we were always kind of, overstepping, maybe playing a bit beyond our means.
And by 82, was the fusion thing still big? Because when people talk about jazz fusion, the two big bands that initially come out was the Mahavishnu Orchestra with McLaughlin, and Return to Forever with Lenny White, Stanley Clarke,
Weather
Altie
Reports.
Miller, and Weather
Report's a big one.
I don't hear them as much, though, in Chick Corea.
They're out there. The big one for me that really changed things up was
Heavy Weather.
Oh, yeah. Unreal.
That's
Unreal.
good stuff.
And Chick Corea was always in the mix, of course. But a couple of years later, two things happened. One was the Chick Corea Electric Band with John Patitucci and Frank Gambale and all those guys. And that changed me completely, listening to those albums. Just unreal.
Well, that was very different stuff. Yeah.
It's just wicked combination of rock and jazz, and they for anyone who really wanted to pay attention, they were blown away by what those guys were doing.
Right.
So there was that. Then there was Sting, Dream of the Blue Turtles, when he took a little break from the Police and he put that jazz band together with Daryl Jones, and Kenny Kirkland, and Omar Hakim, and of course Branford. All of a sudden, he puts this sort of jazz band together, and I was 13 or 14.
It opens more doorways for the listener, right?
And that was a movie too, so I'm watching that, and I'm watching them during a rehearsal break into the Flintstones theme, super up tempo traditional jazz, and I'm listening to Omar Hakim he's smoking that right now. Not even playing hard, but playing a million miles an hour.
You bring that name up, and I ask one question. Maybe you can clarify it for me. Did he play the drums on the remake of Bang a Gong in '85? Was that him?
That was Tony Thompson.
That was Tony Thompson.
Almost.
For some reason, I thought it was Omar.
Yeah.
It was Tony Thompson.
I'm almost positive it was Tony Thompson.
I don't know how they recorded that, but no bigger drum sound I've ever. And I thought I've heard some huge drum sounds for Creatures of the Night's album. Is big,
massive, and kudos to them, because at that time it was very electronic, drummy kind of stuff going on. And then that was the Power Station.
The Power Station. That was powerful.
Duran guys and they had a guitar solo,
right?
No.
Tony Thompson.
Yeah. Okay. I'm almost positive.
Okay.
But huge drum sound and a guitar solo right in the middle of 1985.
God bless them.
Good for them. Good for them.
And it still was commercially successful at that time, too. It just goes to show you
just
never know, man. There's always that outlier.
Absolutely. So that all worked for me up into Steely Dan, massive influence on me. Toto, same thing.
Absolutely.
Massive influence.
Underrated band.
Very underrated. With Toto is
Lukather.
Yeah, that's Steve Lukather, and that's mainly his baby. But David Paich and all those guys.
They were commercially successful. I'm just saying that I think musically they were underappreciated.
There's no doubt about it. I've gotten into arguments with my rock guy buddies about Toto, because I don't want to hear one bad word. Okay,
because they always bring Rosanna up.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly right. And a lot of rock guys, and I'm one of them to a degree.
Sure.
A lot of those guys, I'll talk about who I like and who my influences are and were.
Right.
And I bring up Toto, and they're like, "Well, Toto sucks."
Yeah, where does that come from? I hear that all the time. I don't get that.
I don't get it either, because they're some of the finest players
some of the guitar solos alone, these guys can't
off the charts.
Lukather play you to the dirt, burn you to the dirt.
Not to mention, basically all of Michael Jackson, Thriller, is Toto.
Uh-huh.
And 1,000 other songs. Like these guys...
People won't admit that, though.
These guys are... what they've done is for studio work and all that.
Yeah.
Massive. But songs like Rosanna and Africa, right? If a lot of these rock guys didn't like the song, just subjectively didn't like the song.
Album, dismiss the band.
Then they like dismiss the band.
Yeah.
Oh, those guys suck. And I'm like, listen, man, you could dislike the songs all you want. That's subjective.
Right.
No, I'm not telling you that you should like Rosanna.
Right.
Actually, it's an awesome song.
I have no problem with it.
But I'm not telling you shouldn't like it. But if you're going to tell me the band sucks, well, then you and I are going to have a problem.
Right.
Because they don't suck. They're... A lot of these guys who were huge fans of a lot of the bubblegum metal stuff in the mid 80s loved those bands and thought Toto sucked. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you got a problem.
Well, that's an interesting point. Let's talk about that now for a second before old brain I forget that.
Okay.
I got a very good friend of mine, a stellar guitar player, and he would constantly tell this to me for decades. He said, listen, the real money is with the inadequate players, the folks that really know their way around the instrument, especially on guitar. They can play anyone to the dirt, burn them to the dirt.
Yeah.
Just don't make the heavy bread. It's just not as popular. So
Sad but true,
it goes back to fans not being, and I want to get slagged for this because it's going to come across harsh, but this is reality as I see it. Most music fans that really like music, I'm not talking about like rap and this kind of pop kind of thing. I mean, real music are still rather unsophisticated in the process that goes on creating that music.
Sure.
So a lot of talent goes underappreciated by the average music fan. Would you not agree with that?
Oh, yeah, there's no question. I mean, the work that goes in behind the scenes, the work that engineers do in studios, that's not my thing. I want to go in there and I want to play the kit and make it sound good and get a great performance, and then I have my opinion about production ideas.
Right.
But as far as turning the knobs and doing the actual engineering,
yeah,
I leave that up to
professionals.
Scott Anderson and Sean McDonald and all those guys.
Just take a look
Dana
at
Canoni, all those guys.
Just take a look at, though, like Angus Young can't even count all the money he has.
No, he can't.
Al Di Meola, completely different guitar player, but from a skill standpoint, from a musical theory standpoint, from a performance standpoint, a mechanical standpoint, everything is so far superior to Angus Young, but it's not appreciated in the same way.
It
by
never
the
has
public.
been.
And that's a mystery to me.
I wish that were different, but and that really used to make me angry back in the day. I used to think, but these guys are great players. Getting back to the Toto thing, these guys are great players. They should be making more money. They should be more appreciated. They should be, and they should be, but.
It's the way it is.
Reality, it doesn't always happen. Matter of fact, it rarely happens. How often do you have a band like a Steely Dan, let's say,
an outlier,
who's real, just great songwriting, and they hire the best musicians in the world, great, super high end, top tier music, and they also moved a lot of units. And they also, there's a lot of record sales.
Can't explain it.
Super successful. Right. How many bands have that kind of level of musicianship and have commercial success? How many?
Few. Very few. They actually may be in their own category in that regard.
I think so. I mean, I've seen them 15 times, and they're never off. They're never off.
Kid Charlemagne, to me, when I listen to that, as a guitar player, when I listen to that, it's got
Larry?
the most incredible solo. Yeah. When you talk about playing for the song, all you have to do is show a kid that. That is an example of playing for the song.
Right.
Not only is it cool, does it fit? Mathematically, does it fit? It also rubs a little bit.
Yes.
It's so fucking good.
It really is.
You can't even describe how good that is.
Yeah, and see, to me, again, Larry Carlton, big history in jazz, has very heavily influenced. That guitar solo is a great example of definitely not what you would expect at all.
It wasn't top 40 made for top 40, but
Right.
it was top 40.
Right. But when he he plays the line towards the end.
Oh.
And
It's that one note.
yeah, and again, it's not a fast thing. It's not like a shredder thing
Oh,
at
I
all.
learned it quick, but I never got it exactly right.
Right.
I never got the
and that's the thing.
feel right.
A lot of guitar players learned that solo because it's so cool.
Yeah.
But how many would have thought of it?
That's it.
How
And that's
many-
why they make the money, buddy. That's it.
I mean, it's just insane. You know.
Yeah, I had a guy tell me one time, 15 years ago, I was sitting in a guitar store, and I was talking to the guy, and I said, "Hey, watch this! I can play Clapton. I know the entire Clapton Unplugged Layla."
Okay, great.
He's like, "Great, that's awesome!" Because I wasn't playing very long at that time. He goes, "You're doing great." He goes, "But," I said, "Yeah, it's not that hard." He goes, "Oh, yes, it is. You didn't write it, son."
Right. That's exactly right.
What an eye opener for me! Like, holy shit, he's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm copying and I'm emulating somebody else, and it's great. I learned the mechanics of it.
Yeah. But are you in a position maybe to write something that cool yourself
Exactly.
down the road? And that is what, again, listening to a lot of different musicians, a lot of different musical styles, and practicing and all that, but developing that sensibility so
Right.
that you could be in a position to create. When you get that blank sheet of paper, when I get a song and a couple of ideas from Jim, can we make a killer drum part for this song?
Right.
You're tapping into everything you've ever learned your whole life to do that. And at that point, it's either sink or swim. You're either going to create a boring ass drum part, or you're going to write something really cool that drives the song and makes someone think, I wasn't expecting that, and that is smoking, and it's really, really
Right.
grooving and making total musical sense. That goes back to the Larry Carlton guitar solo in Kid Charlemagne.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have expected that in a million years, the way he played it and the notes. But it totally works. So, again, having that level of creativity, I can come up with this guitar solo. I didn't even rehearse it. You just played it. And then there's...
Supposedly it's one take.
Yeah.
That's the legend of it,
and
the
that-
lore
and
of it.
Can you imagine, and even
Those
Donald...
guys listening to it?
Even Donald Fagen.
Yeah. What did Fagen's mind... What did his mind do when he heard it the first time?
I'm telling you, he probably knew immediately, that's the one. We could bring in 10 more guitar players, which they probably did. But, I think that's the one we're going to keep. And certainly it was.
Skunk Baxter ended up there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He was doing more rhythm stuff, but I know back in the Reelin' in the Years days, him and Denny and a bunch of guys, they had Wayne Krantz in the band.
Right.
They had... who's the guy they've had for a while now, a New York City guitar player? John Harrington. They've had a bunch of guitar players, but every one of them's good. Every one of them is good, and every one of them could tear apart jazz and rock and soul.
Well, I saw a video clip of them recently where I think it was Harrington was playing the solo, and to his credit, he didn't go note for note with Carlton. He put his own spin on it, and he was good.
Yeah.
But it's still such a fucking letdown.
I know.
There's just nothing. And I've heard Carlton do it live where he embellished, and it was a letdown to me because it wasn't as good as what was on that studio
I think
recording.
when a solo stands out that much, it almost becomes melody to the listener.
Yeah,
And then
like Stairway to Heaven's the same way. It's always bastardized. The soul is always bastardized.
Sure, and it's like when it's that memorable, you almost want to hear the solo note for note. For me, I almost never want to hear that. I almost always want to hear a drummer, a guitar player, a bass player.
Generally, I think most appreciators of music probably enjoy live records for that reason. As a kid, I mean, getting the Rush All the World's a Stage record in '75 and hearing the first 3 records and this version
Live,
of it
right.
with Peart on drums was just a whole nother ballgame.
No doubt, and I've always thought of it that way. Like the original recording's awesome, and that's there, and that's established the song. But later on, you have the ability to use that song to maybe say something a little different, or imagine that. Okay, what if we wrote this song right now? How would we play it? In other words, let the song breathe a little bit and let it develop to the idea where when you play a live show, you're not bound to just play it the way it was originally recorded.
Okay.
You have the ability to respect the original, but let it grow a little.
Okay.
You know, and I've always loved that. If you're listening to an up-and-coming musician who is playing a solo note for note from their hero, that's great, but it almost comes off like, hey, I'm trying to prove to you that I have the ability to play that guitar solo. So I'm going to learn it note for note and play it. Well, that's awesome. But what would you have played? If you were given those chord progressions,
interesting.
What would your solo have been? I still want to see what you would have played.
Their interpretation.
Yes, there's no doubt. I probably already know that the musician, if they're a good player, I probably already know that you have the technical ability to play that solo. Great, but show me something else.
Yeah. So back to your story. You played through high school, and at what point did you, or was there a point where you said to yourself, I want to do this not only forever, but I want to do this as a living? Or did you really know that you wanted to do multiple things in your life? Did you know that from a young age?
Wow. Yeah, that is a loaded question, a huge question. I was just talking about
what we
this.
do here.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I was just talking about this with Chuck yesterday on Facebook. I always thought it would be really, really tough unless I got super lucky to do music as my only source of income.
So you were pragmatic at a young age then?
I still am.
He's young.
Yeah, I am.
You're very pragmatic.
Yeah, I very much so. Not that I couldn't grind out a living. I could, but it would really, really be tough. And, have this argument a lot. And again, this is what I was talking about with Chuck yesterday. Some musicians will believe that you aren't taking it seriously if you're not doing it full time. And I'm going, okay, realistically.
That's a school of thought out there.
Absolutely. It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
Realistic to think that way.
Oftentimes that's true, depending on what your situation is with money and all that. But for me, I never wanted to rely on it constantly. But I try to stress to anyone who has this conversation with me, it doesn't mean it's not very important.
Yeah.
Like they think that you're not taking it seriously because you're not full time. And I'm going, no, that's not the case. Trust me, that's not the case. Definitely not the case. So I've always thought that I wanted to develop both. I wanted to develop a real career, hopefully doing something on my own, which I am doing now, selling.
Right.
I'm, as an independent rep, I'm selling fire-rated glass and fire-rated framing and a bunch of building items for schools and office complexes and all that. So I do that during the day. But, once 5 o'clock hits, I'm a musician only. And I love it. I mean, it's a ton of hours, but I'm developing both simultaneously. And it's awesome. I mean, I have no problem going after the whole ball of wax for both at all times. And I'd like to think that I'm proof that I am taking it seriously, even though I'm not at it full time.
Right. Your body of work. Your body of work is
I think so.
Is proof enough.
I hope. I hope that if someone watches us play a show, they would understand that yes, I'm serious. Not everyone's going to see it that way. And sometimes I think people just want to dump all over you because you're not full time. And there's a bit of that out there. But again, that's going to happen. And whatever, I'll just deal with it.
There's always going to be insecurity too with people. Musicians are some of the most insecure people walking the planet. You don't say.
Yeah, really. Get out.
Artists in general, your actors, your people in theater.
Yeah,
and you have to be. I think because you lay so much of your human expression on the line.
Yeah.
And can make it that way.
And there's a lot of people out there who just think you're crazy because you're not going to an office and working 9 to 5.
They don't understand it.
They don't understand
and it. That goes with being an entrepreneur in general.
That, yes. And this idea, like, okay, that's really cute that you play drums, but when are you gonna open a hardware store? When are you gonna go get a job and slowly just regret every decision you've ever made? To me, I don't know what I'd be doing if I weren't a drummer and getting the therapy from drumming to offset everything else that's screwed up in your life, and for me, I use that a ton. I use drumming to clear my head. I have to have it. So it's beyond just that I'm taking it seriously. It's way more than that. It's my mental health on the line here.
I think that's the case with a lot of musicians, me included to a degree. I mean, it's the guitar's therapy. I don't play as much as I should, but just for me, it's getting, and I think every human needs that hour and a half a day, 2 hours, whatever the time limit. For some, it's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But you need that time to go, there's a famous phrase, and I don't know if it's biblical or not, but, go to your closet.
Yes.
And I think that we all mentally kind of need to get there.
Yeah, and I would say even 15 or 20 minutes a day is way better than nothing.
No question.
Same with the gym. Even if you can only sneak in the gym for 20 minutes and do 20 minutes of working out and then you have to go because something else is cooking, that's way better than not going at all.
No question.
So, yeah, for me, practicing is that. If I'm playing at home just to practice, I'm playing my kit, I'm playing cajon, I'm playing my sync, whatever it is, man. Like, I need to strike things. And
should have been a boxer.
Yeah, maybe. But I need to strike things and hear some kind of a response and hear sonically some kind of a reaction to what I'm playing and hear something good. And without that, I don't know. I don't know where I'd be. I'd be in a rubber room because I've used that all my life to, well, like you said before about drumming, very, very visceral, and it's a caveman thing.
It's aggressive too.
It is. And when not that I don't want to tell you that I have like a horrible life. I don't. I'm super thankful. But when things aren't going well, I have the drums.
Right.
And it's killer. I mean, I can walk off of that drum set and feel like I've reset and everything's back to normal again. And now I'm going to go deal with this crap problem that I was dealing with before, with a clear head. So yeah, it goes way beyond just taking it seriously. It's like what drumming has done for me is I've needed it. It. So I have needed that, and I have needed a career as well that's a bit more stable as far as income goes. So I'm simultaneously making both work. And again, a lot of hours. And really, I'm never not working, even if I'm in Vegas or whatever on vacation. I'm still working all the time.
It's a life of an entrepreneur.
Well, I mean, you have this and you have your computer with you and you're just never not working. But so what? I'm enjoying it all, and I don't have a supervisor.
Yeah, right on.
So again, a lot of hours, but I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Let's talk a little bit about two areas I want to go. Let's talk first technology. So we don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole and lose our audience either, but I do want to hit on this. You grew up in an era of analog drummers. Now, analog's a funny word when you think about drums in general, but when I mean analog, I mean you are creating that sound based upon your own inertia.
Yes.
Whether it's cymbals, whether it's drum heads, you are creating that sound, the texture of that sound, the volume of that sound. Right around, would you say 80, 81 in popular music, the electric drum, although it was out a little earlier than that, but became kind of a thing. Do you remember that? What was your, as a young person playing the drums, what was your first take on the electric drums?
It was Bill Bruford with Yes. Was probably the first example. And then Alex Van Halen a little bit started messing around with it. And I had my moment with a Simmons kit when I was, whatever year that was, 83, 84.
They were pricey back then.
No doubt. That was my first my first exposure to it. And at first, back then I was playing not good quality drums. So the idea of being able to plug in and get a good tone,
or a predictable tone,
just with this brain you had right here, and it kind of was appealing to me. And I played that Simmons kit as a 14 and 15-year-old for, I'd say, a year and a half, 2 years. Then, I don't know, I grew into it, and then I grew out of it. And then by the time 85, 86 happened, I'm like, yeah, I gotta go buy an acoustic drum kit again. I have to. My ears couldn't take it anymore. And then as I got older, more and more and more so, I started experimenting more with acoustic kits, and didn't even like triggering electric sounds anymore because I wanted the tone to be completely acoustic. So I was exposed to
Explain triggering.
Triggering is when you're loosely you're adding a device to an acoustic drum set that is triggering an electronic sound elsewhere, and this gives you the ability to still play a real drum head, but trigger an electric sound from some other source. So you could mix the two, which has its advantages.
Some of your aged rock stars are doing that and have been doing that because they're not hitting the drums as hard as they once did.
Yeah,
so
I
they're
get
doing
that.
it for volume purposes.
Probably. Although I got to tell you, I'm still a pretty hard hitter, and again, thank God I'm in a band like the Sun King Warriors
Right,
that loves
that.
that. Because not
Peter
everyone.
Criss was the first one I heard and read about that he, during his last go around 15 years ago, was
Needed it.
He needed it.
Yeah.
he
Well,
needed it.
if it's late in your career and you have no choice and you need it, then you need it.
Right. I never heard it before that.
Okay. I'd rather not. I don't know if I'm just getting old and cranky or whatever. Like anymore, I'm just like, I want an acoustic kit, and look, I got so lucky because we're popular enough with this band that Sonar, Jerry Goldenson approached me and said, would you be interested in being a Sonar artist?
Right.
And I'm like, Jerry, let me think about that. Yeah. How soon can you send me the kit? It's just incredible. And Sonars, they've been making drums since
Right.
the late 1800s.
Right.
Killer German company. I was playing Yamaha before that, which was also a great drum kit, but this drum kit I have now from Sonar is just stupid. It's I can't get over it. And this is why it kind of dovetails into what you were just saying, that I can't imagine triggering
Right.
with a drum kit like this that I'm playing now.
Right.
It needs no help. Right? And I also want to make that drum kit speak completely organically. I don't want anything tainting it, and as I get older, that's the way I look at playing drums. It's the way I look at studio things.
Right.
I'd rather it be as human as possible, and just there's enough processing out there
Okay.
to handle
Yeah.
its requirements. I'd rather not. I'm going old school.
Most top 40 stuff now is programmed, and even auto-tune for vocals.
Yeah.
There's auto-tune for guitar work now because the guitar players aren't even that great anymore.
Yeah, well, again, this is where it becomes, with modern music, this is where it becomes like, okay, we're having a band come into the studio, and that band is, right? It's cookie cutter. And everybody kind of, a lot, I'd say too many musicians walk out of a recording studio today, and the recording studios have become so advanced that the performance sounds more like the studio than it does like the musicians who walked in there to perform. And to me, this is where it gets a little bit funny.
Yeah.
Again, getting old and cranky. I wanna hear the musicians. Now, I'm all for awesome microphones and mic placement, and I'm all for a killer recording studio and all of that. Of course I am. But I don't want the performance tainted
Yeah.
in any way, really. And
Well, engineers became celebrities.
yeah. And a lot of them, I'd say most of them, do incredible work. And again, I don't have the brain to even wrap my head around all the knob turning and all the effects and all that stuff that they do. I can't say a word about it because I can't do it. I would just so much rather not have the electronic end and the processing end be so prominent. Because I mean, look at the difference between a lot of today's musicians.
Right.
What do they sound like live versus what do they sound like in the recording studio? It's miles apart.
Well,
Whereas
live performance is generally disappointing.
it almost has to be anymore, unless the
Wasn't
band.
that way 30 years ago?
Well, how much help were they getting 30 years ago in the recording studio, though? If you're talking about the Fog Hats of the world or the Grand Funks of the world, when they went in and recorded "We're an American Band," it was pretty raw. It's basically a live performance. So you know, they could go play live and really do what they did in the studio, and it was going to sound like Grand Funk.
I think the Allman Brothers are that way.
Absolutely.
You know? I mean,
There's a lot of examples. The Doobie Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and this is
Skinner.
where, oh yeah, when you talk about 81, 82, right? So from there and back,
right.
there, that seems to be the time when 81, 82 is when equipment kind of like grabbed a bit more and made a bit more of the processing more available to musicians, and there's a lot of advantages to it. Of course there are.
Yeah, I think that our ears also became accustomed to a more polished sound with technology. We were just as listeners, and then we expected things to sound a certain way.
Yeah, and it does sound good. I'm not saying it doesn't, but
sometimes,
right?
It doesn't always sound natural.
Yes, I'd rather the way I'm moving toward now, man, is natural and human. I want the human end. I miss the days of going into a recording studio and needing to get a whole take.
Yeah.
You know, going in and needing to play the whole song through and nailing it. I miss that. It was more difficult, and that way of recording is more difficult on engineers, and I get all that, but I miss being able to walk in and knowing the song, and not going in and recording the intro, and then a new take for the verse and a new take for the bridge and a new take for the chorus.
And that's what the fan doesn't get. Like when you listen to a song, you immediately think, "Oh, they're in the studio, they're pounding out this song," but things are so specialized.
They really are.
And that's a trend in society. In sports, more specialized. You know, in business, things are real specialized.
Yeah,
and it went to music as well.
Yeah, and I think I remember Vinny Colaiuta talking about this in an interview a few weeks ago, and he talked about the magic that is missed if a band isn't playing live in a recording studio and at least tracking bass and drums and guitar or bass and drums and piano together. You're missing some of the magic that could happen. Yeah. On an improvisational level, or just a certain thing that happens where a musician starts to feel something creatively and just goes with it, and that creates a ripple effect.
Some of that's the best work ever.
Exactly, and all of that is gone and out of the question
off script
when everybody's tracking separately.
Yes.
Again, yes. I totally get engineers loving recording separately so they have total control. I get it, but man, you're missing what can happen live when you don't have the musicians in the same room playing together. Afterwards, you can still do whatever you're going to do, overdubs and effects and whatnot. But I think there could be a happy medium in recording today where it is the band plays pretty much live, and then do what you have to do in the studio after that, but capture a live performance.
The artist probably
with humans.
That artist probably isn't given that opportunity enough anymore.
Probably not. And again, it's not one of these things where I say, "Oh, it's the only way I'll record." Of course not. I love going into a recording studio, and I love it. And I'll do whatever's asked. But man, you miss a lot of the magic.
Yeah.
When it's not recorded live. That's my 2 cents anyway on it.
Let me throw some influential drummers at you and say a word about, or say as many words as you like. But no chronological order, although my brain will probably work that way.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
Lenny White.
Yeah, Lenny White, again, was really early for me, and one of the drummers who showed me that you can be this, you could have this killer groove and a killer funk thing, but be able to be really, really versatile too. Like he could play a salsa groove and really be good at it, and be able to navigate these crazy compositions that Chick Corea and Stanley Clarke was laying down. I mean, again, he that's one of the guys who redefined for me what the drummer could be in a band.
Okay.
And that's the best way I could say it about Lenny. You know, there's a lot of drummers who are that way for
About
me.
Cobham.
Yeah, okay. Big, huge drum kit, right? Really, I just saw him at NAMM 2 years ago. Really, really nice guy.
He's still playing, right? He's like 70 plus now.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. He was one of the first huge drum kit guys for me, and the way that he played up and down that kit, and how man, talk about like movement and being able to play real fast, and you know, with a lot of dexterity and being able to play the whole kit. He redefined things for me too, but more about he was a big drum kit guy for me. So him and Simon Phillips, and all those kind of guys who play large drum kits. I always looked at that like, hey man, I'll never be doing that, because I never want to carry that drum kit, and I don't want to tune it, you know. But if I ever had a tech, maybe, you know. But that, I mean, that's crazy to be able to handle all that and be able to play it all well and do all that stuff he does up and down. Crazy, just crazy. So yeah, him and Simon Phillips too. Another.
What Ginger Baker do for you?
I love Ginger Baker. Again, he played with. He did those after Cream was done. He did those things where he'd bring in, was it Art Blakey? I forget. He would do all these huge like drummer battle things because he loved jazz drummers.
He's a little bit aggressive. Huh?
What a psycho. I mean, look, I could say that I love Ginger Baker because I never met him and I never hung out with him.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's a caustic individual.
Dangerous guy. Dangerous in many ways. But I loved the way he played. I mean, he was the first guy who really made 1 and 3 work. Like you know the way he recorded "Sunshine of Your Love,"
right,
and played everything backwards.
Right.
Not 2 and 4. That's like no one does that. You know,
Peart got a little bit of that from him.
yeah, sure.
We'll
but "Sunshine of Your Love" was the first time I can remember being real young and thinking, the drummer's playing this backwards. What's he doing? You know,
really good drugs back then.
Oh man, you ain't lying. But yeah, heavy jazz influence there with Ginger too, and I love that. But you know, I saw the movie with him recently, and that's, you know, that was an eye opener.
Yeah,
it really was.
There. I got a really weird take on him recently. There's a John Lydon documentary for Public Image, and Baker was on an album with Steve Vai and Johnny Rotten.
Really?
Yeah, it's Baker's interviewed for the documentary. It's called "The Public Image is Rotten" is the name of the documentary, but there's a section on Ginger Baker which is just out there. Yeah.
I thought I knew about all these kinds of recordings. I guess
you
I
need
don't.
to look that up. He came in for that record, and I think he split drum duties with some other drummer, which the name escapes me now. But Ginger Baker played on a Johnny Rotten record, and you can't even put those two mentally even remotely together. But so does Steve Vai.
Did you say Steve Vai as well?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's in 1986.
What a combo!
And the songs are really interesting. Wow. Vai didn't overplay. I don't think Ginger Baker overplayed either, because that's what I guess Rotten didn't want to happen. Good stuff. Check it out. Let's talk, because I've been waiting for this. You're the first guest on this show that made sense to talk about the loss of Neil Peart, what he meant to you, and what Rush was to you at that age, because we're roughly the same age, and I think we have got some similar stories there.
I mean, that was the first guy who freaked me out. You know, it was the Spirit of Radio, to be specific.
Okay.
That was the song that made me think, I got to be a drummer. You know,
really, that song,
that particular song.
Okay,
the intro and then the groove in the first verse. That was what sold me on it. So that was 1981. he was the guy who, you know, the drums were loud in the mix, and those high toms that were so throaty and just speaking, and the way he played them, you know, nobody was doing that really at that time in that way in a big rock band, you know, that was about to be, you know, one of the largest progressive rock bands ever.
Right.
So all the planets were aligning. Neil, you know, again, just had the guts to play exactly how he needed to play, and everyone who was questioning it just didn't matter, you know.
Love that, though.
Oh, I love it too.
Love that.
The sound of his kit, the sound he got.
It's
unreal.
Can I stop you there? Because this is, you may be able to have this conversation with me. As a Rush fan, I break the band down into many eras, per se, but the early albums he was on, starting with Fly By Night and Caress of Steel, because he wasn't on the first record.
Right.
And then going, let's say, all the way to 2112, there was a dampness, I thought, to his drum tom sound.
Oh, yeah.
A dampness, and that's the only word I can use to describe it.
Sure.
I listened to Fly By Night, especially that album.
Almost dead.
Almost dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think that was cognitively thought out at that time?
Probably.
Or was there limitations in equipment at that time?
No.
It's so different than what came in the late 70s and beyond.
Oh, no doubt. It may, I don't think it was gear, because they could have had more resonance in the toms and whatnot. I think most likely, based on what they did in Caress of Steel, is the one song that's all drums.
Dick Dax and Narpitz.
And Narpitz, right? Okay, so
we are going down the rabbit hole.
We are deep. We're deep.
That's okay.
But Lakeside Park and all those tunes.
Spite Horn and Snow Dog is a very dead-sounding tom sound. As
so,
a kid, I recognized, like,
yes.
this, I guess I couldn't emulate it. I couldn't find anything else.
Well, here's the thing.
It sounded like that.
They were, you know, they were going for a very staccato vibe, because what Neil was playing was very, very fast, up and down these toms, and a lot of notes, right?
Yeah.
And
articulate.
Very articulate. So you wanted a tom sound that helped to emulate that and helped to bring it out. If you were playing toms that were too resonant and had too much reverb and whatnot, that can get lost, right?
Okay.
So
there wasn't any reverb on that.
Well, very little, if any.
Here, okay.
And very compressed and tight and staccato.
Okay.
You know, it's a staccato thing.
Okay.
So the drum tone for Phil Collins, that's not going to work for Caress of Steel.
Got it.
I mean, musically, it isn't. Now, once you got into Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, and all, you know, all those albums, the gear started getting a little better, and they could do more. They could make the toms, I think, sing a little more and give them a little more body.
More musical, would you say?
Yeah, I would, but still tight enough that Neil could play all his stuff. You got to have both, I think. So that's probably why.
Yeah,
would be my guess.
I think about, like, the Fly By Night album, especially listening to the song Fly By Night, listening to Bite Torn a Snow Dog, just listening to those fills, and the tom sound was just one way, and then it kind of still was there on All the World's a Stage.
Sure,
but you could tell it was live. It was kind of the same,
right?
A little bit of reverb. Maybe it was natural reverb, or maybe it was effect. I don't know. And then everything just kind of got real odd and weird during a very weird album, 2112.
No question about that.
But still had a lot of fills on that record.
Busy playing.
But that still had that kind of dead tom tone. It was not reminiscence later on. His sound changed.
No doubt. I mean, and think of it this way too. What year was 2112?
76.
76?
Yeah.
77. That's going back. I mean, it's not super old gear, but it's back there. The difference between the gear and 76.
Played Tama, right, back then.
Oh yeah. He was. I think he was playing Slingerland way back, but Tama for a long time, and then DW he switched to later on.
The era of Ludwig for a while too. I think.
Yeah, I want to say so. I don't know how many gigs I saw with him playing those, but
Tama just had that. What about Tama that fit his style? Early on.
Again, big throaty toms.
Okay.
His 6-inch and 8-inch and 10-inch toms had that real, almost talking kind of a voice to them
Okay.
that really, really gave him, I think, is what gave him his signature sound. This is what caused so many drummers, just like me, at that time, 80, 81, 82, they had the normal 5-piece drum kit, and then they had the rototoms, right? 6, 8, and 10.
Yeah.
Because they were pretty cheap.
They were
And-
like thinner. There
Yeah.
wasn't any body to it.
Pretty
It was
much
a
just
metal
the rim.
frame.
It's
Yeah,
just the rim.
We had those in high school band, I
Right.
think, in that era.
So that was the cheapest way to get into small toms up here, so you could learn Neil Peart licks. That's basically what that was. That's pretty much it.
So, do you ever find yourself putting on like Tom Sawyer and playing that?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Can you play it note for note
Well,
correctly?
I've not listen.
And I don't mean that with any scorn.
Yeah.
Because it's
I've not done it since '84. I mean, the cover band I was in 1983, '84, we covered the song, and I was very proud of myself that I played it. But it's been since then since I've rehearsed it. You know, it's not a song that
right.
not a song that you're ever going to play again unless you're in a Rush tribute
Well,
band.
of course.
So to answer your question, I think I could. I know the song.
Yeah, because
I just haven't rehearsed it.
Peart said that was always his biggest thrill when he would actually, as an older guy, would play it right. You know, because it was so rare that even in the middle of a tour, he's still not playing it to his ear exactly right.
Yeah, very labor-intensive song. There's no let-up. There's really very little breaks in it, and with a hi-hat that's that 16th note driven with one hand. It's not like you can play it with two. There's really just no breaks, you know. So that song is tough. It's tough because there's a built tension that happens with that song. By the end of it, you're stressed out.
What's his greatest piece of work? I mean, he wrote all the lyrics, so we can talk about lyrics for forever
Until tomorrow, yeah,
but
or longer.
But from a drummer's standpoint, his finest piece of work, if you had to narrow it down, or you can narrow it down to a couple pieces.
Okay, I would definitely, off the top of my head, Natural Science, The Spirit of Radio, almost any of that stuff off of Hemispheres. I loved.
Sigma 6.
Oh man, okay,
Two.
Farewell to
Book two.
Kings.
Yeah.
You
like that era then. You sound like you like the 77 through 81 era.
No doubt. To me, Farewell to Kings through Moving Pictures is when those guys were bulletproof. I mean, bulletproof. Everything about the sound, everything about, you know, like we were talking about before, no effects. Not that everything was dry. I'm talking about effects that might change the performance of the band in the studio. During those years, 78 through 82, everything sounded dead on and completely natural and mixed perfectly intelligible. You could hear everything that everyone was playing, and it was just smoking. I mean, you could tell. I was a little too young to go to the concert when they came to Pittsburgh on Permanent Waves. That's really the concert I would have loved to have seen. But I think the first time I saw them was Moving Pictures.
I was there. Hemispheres as well.
I mean, those, obviously, everything clicked perfectly. To me, Permanent Waves is it.
Is it superior to Moving Pictures?
I think so. Now, I love Moving Pictures, but Permanent Waves, even those shorter tunes, Entre Nous and all those songs, I really like them too.
Right.
But Natural Science and Free Will and The Spirit of Radio are the tunes that at that time, that was my barometer. Like, okay, this is what drumming is.
Jacob's Ladder's on it too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's only 6 tracks on the
about
the
it.
album, I
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah.
3 on each side.
I would also say that song "Vital Signs" off of Moving Pictures.
Yeah.
Great.
So that was a nod toward punk, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah, they mentioned that.
It was weird.
And that song's I get it with that song. That song's a little crazy. I just saw an interview a couple of weeks ago. The Spirit of Radio is actually designed around the idea of you being in your car and changing the stations,
right,
and picking up this station and then getting static and picking up that station. And that's why there's a little reggae thing and there's a little rock thing and there's
it's amazing, huh?
Well, that song is it. I mean, again, you know, for the people out there, I can remember back in the day, like, you know, music critics who would dump all over Rush.
Yeah.
I'm like,
So I have a couple years on you, and tell me if you have a similar experience. I can't tell you why. I don't want to romanticize that little era of my life, but I don't know why exactly that band hit me the way it did. But there was something uniquely mine about that band, because most of my friends at the time were into things I dug too, but it was Kiss and it was a heavy Iron Maiden started then. There's really heavy stuff was coming. But that band was uniquely mine. And then when Moving Pictures came and they got their first taste of commercial success, then everybody was there. And of course, by then you're like, I'm done with them. But there was just something really intrinsically cool that I couldn't articulate as a teenager. And I heard Sebastian Bach say in an interview, you might have heard this, where I think it was on a Rush documentary, where he took the song Entre Nous to his mother. And he asked her, he said, Mom, when you listen to this song, you don't like anything that I do, you don't like any of my music, we're not really connecting here.
Right.
I just want to play you this song because this song it's making me feel a certain way that he probably didn't even understand. But listening to that stuff, going back to the first record all the way through, and all the oddness, but there was just something about that was intrinsically mine. And when Peart passed away earlier this year, it hit me like a member of my family died. I can't say it was the same gravity, because I had my father passed, not too long after that. It wasn't the same gravity, but it was weighty.
Oh, no doubt.
And I'm probably sharing a story here that thousands and thousands and thousands of other people in that era felt the same way. But man, it was a little part of me died with him. The fact that he's not walking around anymore and not contributing or doing things that a senior statesman rock person is doing today, that a little part of me died. Can you relate to any of that?
All of it. I mean, this guy was drums to me back then, So you spend all that time listening to those songs and being influenced by it, and knowing that when you heard some of those tunes, for me, definitely Farewell to Kings, the song
itself.
Oh man,
I know,
unreal.
That acoustic intro,
unreal. So you know what that did to you,
right?
But then here we are. He was still too young. You lost him. It's like losing a family member. It really was.
Yeah.
And I remember, I forget. I think I was at a doctor's office when I got the notice that Neil Peart has passed away. I think I read it 8 or 9 times. I'm like, no.
Most people didn't even know he's sick. I didn't know he was sick.
Neither did I. I had no idea.
Yeah.
A massive, massive loss. Plus, there's the other end of it, too, that says, he was, how old was he, 65? 66? I forget what he was.
66.
But that's young. Mm-hmm. But then there's also the slap in the face of, he's 15-ish years older than us. Mm-hmm. And we're approaching it.
Yeah.
So there's that drag about. Now, that's something that I've spoken about with all my guys.
I'm sure.
Kurt Lawrence and Joe Waslowski and all those guys. We all loved Rush growing up, too.
Right.
And, man, it's too close for comfort.
Well, so in that same vein, and I can briefly remember a conversation in the Civic Arena, the era that we were working with Paul Stanley for a little while. We were sitting talking with him for the first time, deep conversation, beyond phone or whatever. It was the first time head-to-head in a relaxed atmosphere, having a conversation, a real conversation, by looking at him and hearing some stories and some laughter and realizing this guy is 16 years my senior, I think, roughly, in tremendous shape. But, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But at that time, he would have, we would have been in his late 50s.
Right.
We all age.
Absolutely.
The frailty of life was real apparent to me at that moment. It was something I couldn't get out of my mind. I'm going, this is like, we're like getting older. And there's like one of my childhood heroes.
And there he is.
And there he is. But he's, and you get up close on someone, you can see the age. It's one thing about being a celebrity. You preserve pretty well.
Yes.
Generally.
Sure.
But when you're up close, intimate, having a conversation, you can really see.
And look, being a musician, too, is another benefit of it, the therapy. Being a musician keeps you young.
Certainly.
It does. I mean...
Kept him young.
Yes, and I think it keeps most musicians young. If you're taking care of yourself, I'm doing yoga now, and I'm like playing all I can. It keeps you young. But when you're up close with someone,
right,
you can see what the differences are, and it's just a reality check. That was, you were talking about Paul Stanley.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine right now is Matt Starr. He's the drummer in Ace Frehley's band.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Great guy. And we're exactly the same age. But I work with him on some coaching stuff, drumming stuff, but some coaching stuff too. Just a really good resource. And he has a great coaching thing that he does. But you talk about the sense memory of Kiss and what they meant to us, especially when we were young, and the larger than life, that whole thing, right? And now I'm, talking to Matt, who's Ace Frehley's drummer, and we're talking about career stuff and how to promote and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're Ace Frehley's drummer. Okay. It's like, boom. To me, as you grow older and you start doing more things musically, when you're young, everything's massive and huge and wow. You get older, and I've had the pleasure of starting to work with some of these guys, being with Sonar, being with Dream Cymbals.
Right.
I've met some of the best musicians in the world being with those companies.
Right.
And it brings it all full circle. Sometimes when you meet those guys,
yeah,
they're jerks.
Yeah,
and you're like, man, it would have been better if I had never met him.
Yeah,
I
knock on wood for me, Stanley was amazing to work with for a lot. We were 8 years. He was phenomenal. Gene was Gene. So but seeing those folks, and I guess the other point to before I have more drummers to ask you about. But another thing that a fan does, especially a non-musician fan, doesn't understand too is you want to be entertained. You want it to be glossy and slick and explosive, and you want to see a big rock show.
All that.
And the years that I had the opportunity to get that little peek inside how things kind of generally get set up and work, and I can just remember 2011. I know you can relate to this. 2011, I'm standing side stage, some show in Chicago or something, and I'm talking to Fran Stuber, Paul's tech, friend of mine. And I looked up, and they were putting flash pots on the stage, and people were running around doing their things. But I looked at all the equipment, not the guitars or the drums, but I looked at the rigging. I looked at the fake speakers that were part of the thing, because that's part of the whole optics.
Yeah.
And you look at the laser lights, but you look at the hardware, and that shit really, the thing that blew my mind was that shit really gets beat up and torn up, and it's like not glossy, slick, and beautifully aesthetic as you think as a fan. It's a fucking production, man. It's a day in, set up, tear down, set up, tear down, and that stuff gets worn and worn out, and so do the faces of the road crew.
Oh, definitely.
2/3 into a tour.
Definitely.
So if you think they're grumpy to you, they probably are.
Yeah.
It's hard work, man. I
It
can
is.
see where you know what I'm saying?
Well, it's real easy to go to a show and enjoy the show and then
Be overwhelmed.
overwhelmed, and then you walk out of there. Concert was great. To me, I always, if I go to see any big show, I love to sit side stage if I can, because I want to be behind the PA if I possibly can. Plus, be close to the guys and girls, of course, close to the crew and close to the stage. I want to see everything happening in the back.
It's fascinating.
And to me, as soon as the show ends, I don't want to leave. I let everybody else leave, and I want to sit there. I want to watch their crew.
Yeah.
And see the differences between their shows and the shows that we do.
Yeah.
As far as PA and whatnot, and I mean, the level they do it is huge. They have 2 sets of trucks, and they have the PA arriving the day before often, and all of that.
Right.
But it's real easy, especially as a non-musician, to leave out of there and think, okay, boom, okay, it's over. They don't just
Well, see, I got an unvarnished view of a lot of that for a lot of years. It happened to be my favorite band.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
And so it didn't skew it. The members were wonderful, and you know, Paul and Gene and those guys, Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, great guys, no issues there. But seeing the unvarnished version of it, I'm not sure it was the best for my fandom. Does that make any sense?
It does. It changes because as a fan, it's just all killer and beautiful.
The optics that you see.
Yeah. To us back then, the presentation was just beautiful, and this was Kiss. Come on, you know, the hottest band in the world. But when you end up on the inside a little and see what all goes into it,
yeah, especially that band with the costumes and the makeup, it's just it's a very different thing going on.
Yeah, very high maintenance and very labor intensive. And
high maintenance all the way around.
The way around. So and yeah, you know, you look at that and you say, oh, okay, this spectacle isn't such a spectacle. There's the reality of it too that very few people see.
So let's talk about that for a second. Maybe my issue was that I saw too many shows. I was taking photos for a couple years. I was doing a lot of shows and delivering guitars. And I had some work to do when I was there. So I'm looking at it differently.
Sure.
Case in point, you know, had it happened with the band Rush, I'm sure that would have affected the way I viewed the band as well too. It just became, it wasn't quite as special, the live experience, as it was for me before I knew any of these people.
Too real.
It was too real, and part of that
real.
And part of that band's whole lore was that they were superheroes, and you needed to buy into the whole spectacle to enjoy it completely.
Yep.
Would you not agree?
Absolutely. I can remember going to concerts when I was 10 or 11 and just being able to just enjoy the band without picking apart everything.
I know. It's the worst. It's the worst.
It's the worst.
It's the worst.
You know, I go to a concert now and I want to approach the front of house guy and say, "Are you sure?
What the fuck are you doing?"
You know, you have a feedback issue here. You know that
That's great,
the snare drum isn't, or you know.
That's great though, in a way.
I go to the front of house guy and say something like, "Is the drummer not giving you any snare drum, or are you just why is there no snare drum?" I've done that.
Why am I not surprised?
I've done that.
Why am I not surprised?
I've done that at the Star Lake Amphitheater, which I will still call it the Star Lake Amphitheater.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do.
I've done it because a lot of these guys now are walking around with iPads, and they're like right behind me, and I'll be like, "Luke's guitar is Luke in the mains?" And the guy will look at me, and I'm like, "Is Luke in the mains?" And he's pissed off, and I'm like, please don't assume every person in the audience is not a musician.
Yeah. That's a very good statement.
So,
because I'm sure that's definitely happening.
Right. So if I'm saying to you, is Steve Lukather, is Luke in the mains? That guy should know that I've asked a pertinent question.
Yeah, someone's picking up on it.
Right, and he doesn't need to dump all over me and say, no.
Yeah.
No.
Well, no, I get it. No, I totally get it.
So
I totally get it.
But that, if we weren't in it personally, we wouldn't care.
Come on, when you go to a Rush concert, how many guys are playing air drums, man? It's unbelievable.
Everyone.
And every spackle throughout just a handful. You will find some females at a Rush show. Not many. But you'll find some. But every freaking guy, especially in the first 30 rows, is playing air drums.
Yep. And why not? Why not?
It's incredible, man.
Again, that gets back to that tom thing and the way that his tom screamed from left to right.
I think that's it. I think that's the magic, and I think that's where I pinpointed the difference in tone. And you know, there's so many eras of Rush, but the electrical era, there was still some great music, Big Money and Hold Your Fire. And all
I
that
love that stuff
Presto.
too. Sure.
And there was some moments of big drumming. Like I think of the first song off of Presto. Was just
really, really cool.
Whatever that was. It wasn't Presto. The first song off of that Show Don't Tell. Or,
yeah,
like he's singing.
Yeah. Again, now that's at that era, the gear was getting really, really good. To my ears, that became a little bit more of like this, okay, here's how much low end we can produce with this modern day recording studio. To me, the sound got a little thick for me in that era. I'm talking after the mid 80s thing, like I'm saying 89 through.
Let me ask you this. So did you like Counterparts?
Yeah.
Animate, did you like that
Sure.
song?
To me,
doesn't sound like you did.
Well, here's the thing.
I thought that was the return back to guitar music for me.
It was. It was. But that's where overall the whole production to me started to have too much low end.
Okay.
It was. I could listen to 2 songs, but if I got into 4 or 5 songs, my ears couldn't wrap my head around that much low end anymore. Whereas Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, you could hear Geddy playing bass, of course, but there wasn't
those
this
Rickenbackers. See, I think the Rickenbackers gave you that mid-range growl.
Yes,
and that was part of their sound back then.
It really was, and it gave intelligibility, and you could hear everything Geddy was playing, but it wasn't this massive low end.
They changed producers multiple times. I'm trying to think who they went to in from 89 through like 94.
Sure. Well, again, at that time, a lot of producers were, we have this gear now, and we're going to make you guys sound full and big, bassy, low end and all that. And that's great for some things. But I still go back to...
I'm a Terry Brown fan.
Yeah.
And Terry Brown, to me, was such an integral part of that freaking experience for me.
Yeah.
And I was the nitnoid kid that would read the album liner.
Oh,
so
no
I knew
doubt.
who Skip Gildersleeve was. He was the touring manager.
Well, that's why that album is what it is.
We're going to get there.
I got as close as I could.
No, but those were important things to... Because, again, we were starved for information.
Yep.
There wasn't an internet. So we were starved for more information on and Rush was not a band that you could find in Hit Parade or Circus Magazine.
No,
they weren't in there.
They were nerds.
They were Canadian as well.
Right, so Rolling Stone didn't care.
Yeah,
whatever.
so the only thing we got was the liner notes and when you starved as a kid learning that stuff, that you picked up on all those things, and we just... To me, Terry Brown produced everything. He was just Terry Brown. It wasn't until 2010 I even knew what the guy looked like until he was on a documentary.
Right.
But until they parted ways with him, I want to say in '84 with Grace Under Pressure was the first record they parted ways. But that was a body of work that is so fucking unbelievable. And a lot of people, whether you're a Rush head or not, you appreciate it, recognize that Brown, it seems like as time goes on, as it comes out, Brown had more and more of his fingerprints all over that stuff.
No doubt. I think so. I mean, again, I don't want to like dump all over Grace Under Pressure or those kind of albums because it was the time too, Yeah. That's the way things started to sound. A lot more keyboards.
It was Duran Duran and Tears for Fears, man.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Even at that time, it comes down to musicianship and writing songs well, performing well. And so to me, in the mid-'80s, in the middle of all of that, you still had Level 42. Excellent musicians. You still had Mr. Mister.
Yeah.
Killers.
Yeah.
So there were still bands like that at that time.
Yeah.
But, Rush fell into a thing there where their sound overall became vastly different. More modern. But
More electronic.
More electronic. But as you look back now, I mean, Grace Under Pressure was 5 years after the era we've been talking about for those guys. And huge difference to me.
But you know what? It's funny, though. Those records Rush is one of those bands, I think, that the body of work seems to stand the test of time. When I go back to the Kiss catalog, there are moments where I just...
You cringe.
Fucking cringe. Usually it's Gene Simmons wrote songs, by the way. But I will cringe at some of the stuff in the 80s especially, where I don't know if I have very many cringeworthy moments in the Rush's catalog. I don't.
To me, there's excellent, and then there's slightly less excellent.
Yeah,
with Rush.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That's pretty much how I see it. Whereas I know what you mean about Kiss. There's moments where for them too. They listen to that and they're going, oh,
they've got some tread. They've got some mileage out of it, though, for sure.
Absolutely.
So back to drummers. First impressions on drummers. Keith Moon.
Okay, again, not really my guy.
Okay.
I
Were
love.
you influenced by him at all when you were younger?
Oh, sure, because I loved the Who.
Okay.
And I loved.
You did?
Yes. I just
The
I just saw
musical
them.
part of the Who.
Just saw them
Yeah.
when they came last time to the
Okay.
to the arena.
Okay.
Loved them. Love Pete Townsend.
Okay.
But again, Pete Townsend played with Simon Phillips.
Yeah.
And that made me, of
course.
love him even more.
Right.
Keith Moon. Look, obviously I love the energy, and we talked before about what my role is in the band,
Yeah.
driving the song. We don't want mushy,
Yeah.
undefined drums that aren't strong. And Keith was all over that. It's just that Keith's demons got the best of him, to say
Yeah.
the least. And to me, I'm a big believer in the lifestyle away from the kit
Right.
supports what you play
It would
when
have
you are
to,
behind the
right?
kit.
It would have to.
So I'm trying, especially with COVID. I'm working out a ton, and I'm eating as best I can. and
Different era, though, right?
Very different era.
They didn't
He-
understand nutrition like they do
zero.
today.
And he
Yeah.
certainly didn't understand yoga. That's
What
for sure.
Bonham do for you?
Loved them to death. Again, now John Bonham, absolutely massive, mainly because of like Good Times, Bad Times,
Okay.
and what he did with his foot
Okay.
there. And I can remember being 11 and sitting in my basement for months, like, I think I can do this, and I finally did it. So I was one of the youngest kids to be able to play that rhythm with and do that flutter with my right foot, and I would obsess over that. But John Bonham had groove. He had groove. To me, John Bonham could have definitely played in an R&B thing or a Motown thing. He could have played funk all day long. I loved how heavy he was, but mainly, again, this was very unaffected, natural, just killer, natural drumming, and he laid it down. I loved the way he could just play the simplest thing in the world and make it sound great. All of my love.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen this?
Just that, the simplest stuff. He
Some of the
killed it.
exposés on him on YouTube. There's some folks that have deconstructed a lot of his work, and
Yeah.
it is really, there was so much going on there.
A lot of ghost notes and a lot of supporting of. I mean, this. If I remember correctly, he was pretty big influenced into like big band drummers and big band jazz guys. And again, this is where you get a lot of the ghost strokes on the snare drum and the tiny notes that support the big 2 and 4 that make everything flow and really have that sense of, okay, I'm listening to this drummer play and I'm feeling a forward motion.
I get that on "Fool in the Rain."
Definitely.
I think it's a great example of that.
We cover that in the band. Same deal. That's a halftime shuffle, and when it's played well, it just can't be beat. That's Jeff Porcaro, Bernard Purdy,
Okay.
and "Fool in the Rain," Bonzo. I mean, he crushed it. But all of those songs,
Yeah.
"Fool in the Rain," "Home at Last" from Steely Dan,
Yeah.
and Rosanna from Toto.
Yeah.
All three of those songs are really from the same cloth. They're all basically halftime shuffles. Devastating. Redefined what drumming was.
You familiar with Keely's Last Stand?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Little side note here. That you're familiar with the song, though.
Yeah.
It might not have been on your top of your
No.
play charts, but it was like it was Zeppelin's big.
Big opener kind of a thing. And
It was
huge song.
but it was also a longer song. It had a couple different tempo changes. I honestly believe, had that song never been written, Iron Maiden wouldn't exist today. I think what Iron Maiden became was
out of that.
Yeah. Piece of work.
Very
Not
possible.
Zeppelin, but that piece of work.
Yeah, very
that
possible.
But there were so many songs that Bonham's like. Let me ask you this. When someone says play in the pocket,
Yeah.
I'm real confused as a guitarist what the fuck that actually
Okay,
means.
sure. All right.
But when I listened to Bill Ward of Sabbath, Ward was the next drummer I want to ask you about, but when I listened to that was a very odd thing to me because Ward was not in any kind of groove with Geezer Butler on bass. He was more in tune with what Iommi was playing.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I think that's just the way that Black Sabbath was.
Okay.
Typically, it's the drummer and the bass player who lock in and create pocket.
Okay.
In that band, it was Tony. I don't know why that is, but there's nothing wrong with. I know Steve Smith had that with Neil and Journey a little bit too. They
Okay.
were very, very, very close musically too. I mean,
Okay.
But typically, pocket is bass player and drummer, and pocket is it can be defined, but it's more felt. The drummer is either comfortable to listen to or they're not.
But did Bonham was he really in the pocket with John Paul Jones?
I believe so, yes. But more importantly, I believe that John Bonham had such a heavy right foot.
You think?
Okay? Unbelievably heavy. And it's not just that it was heavy, it was really just brilliantly done and brilliantly played, and he laid it down.
Okay.
So when you're laying it down, you're playing in the pocket. You're talking about the feel. That when you hear that drum beat, you go on YouTube and there's all kinds of soloed out, like John Bonham, you know, just playing drums and everything else is taken off the recording.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's all you need. You listen to that and you're going, Jim Donovan and I talk about this a lot. The brain loves to hear that rhythm that repeats in a comfortable way,
Right.
and it kind of puts you at ease a little
It's
bit.
also predictable
Yeah,
in terms of the way it flows.
Yes, but predictable in a good way.
Okay.
It makes you feel good, and it gives a forward motion to the rhythm, and your brain hears that repeating rhythm, and it says, "Yeah, I like that."
Okay.
Right? This is a killer therapy, and
Right,
some drummers
right.
have that pocket, and some don't. Okay, this could be called you're grooving or you're not, or you're in the pocket or you're not.
Okay.
A lot of that has to do with the subtleties and the ghost strokes that you're playing with your hands, but how heavy and how on it your right foot is.
Okay. Did Ward do anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, but only as much as I loved Black Sabbath
The band,
tunes. Yeah,
as opposed to like he's not like a standout drummer for you.
No, he's not a standout drummer for me. That doesn't mean I don't like him.
I think he's just weird. There's something odd going on there that my head doesn't really wrap itself around.
I would
so
agree with
that might be part of it.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Oh, Charlie Watts. He do anything for you?
Charlie. I love Charlie. It's hard to. I mean, what is someone going to do? Like dump on him because he doesn't play a bunch of stuff?
Yeah.
You know. Guys dump on Ringo too.
Yeah, that's my next one I was going to ask.
Yeah, because he's not this killer drummer. If those guys advertised how great their technical skill was behind a kit, it would ruin the music. I wouldn't want to listen to the Stones
Watts
anymore.
has some weird thing going on because when you watch him, he's riding the
hi-hat.
and then he
he's up.
false hits it or something. Something weird is going on.
They
timing wise.
Yeah, he's real solid. I mean, I can remember stories about him being compared to a metronome, and he was right on it. You know.
Okay.
So that's awesome. But he had this linear thing happening where he would pick up his right hand and play the snare all by itself on the 2s and 4s.
Right.
And so it's this thing.
That's what I'm thinking.
So that's linear.
Okay.
Not a lot of drummers do that.
All right.
I think it's more about how he played and the way he could lay down that rhythm for songs like Hang Fire, like all these tunes. He had to have that laying it down thing.
Okay.
Again, and he did it. Now, he was not nearly as heavy-handed as someone like John Bonham, of course, but he is great for the Stones. And I wouldn't want to have any other drummer who played more fireworks type of stuff.
Right.
I wouldn't
You're not
want
going to put
them
Neil Peart in the Stones.
No,
the styles matter.
Yeah, right. But here's the thing: even the killer drummers who we talked about earlier, if they were thrown into a situation like the Stones, they would know, I think, to play the song and not start advertising this thing and that thing and this lick and that lick. Their musical sense would take over and say, I'm playing Stones music right now, and it's about 2 and 4, and just lay it down and don't be stupid, right? This is not the time to showcase what you can do as a drummer. There's a time and a place, and I'm learning that all the time. I think we're all learning that all the time. But look, Charlie's Charlie. I mean, he's his own thing, and again, you look at that tiny little drum kit and what he can do with that tiny little drum kit. It's beautiful. So yeah, love Charlie. Absolutely. Love him.
Do you have any thoughts, or have you spent any time listening to the work of Eric Singer?
Yeah, a little bit. I only know so much about Eric, but I know he was really, really, I know Paul and Gene really liked him a lot.
Yeah, well respected, and just watching him live he's a force.
Yeah,
he's definitely a force.
And there you go again with this thing where the bands improve a little. It's sad to say.
A lot.
Okay,
I will say it in that instance.
So he's
a huge.
Okay, so they improve a lot. Whenever the original guy is
125 years old.
Right. So whenever the guy who's the original founding member is not there anymore, and then the guys like Paul and Gene, or the guys in Boston, or the guys in any of these bands who retool and put it back together for a tour way later, the band becomes better. Sticks. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And again, I hate to even say this because I love the old stuff, and I love the old arrangement, and I love the original members of the band. It's great. But sometimes these bands actually become better later on when they have to replace, because now they can go pick whoever the hell they want. Yeah. And if they're doing well by that, and they're making good decisions on who to bring in, the band all of a sudden becomes like better than it ever was as far as performance goes.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the case in this instance.
There you go.
But just watching Singer play, and being fortunate to stand that close and watch a rehearsal and watch that he's and
really, really good.
And he's an interesting guy in that he got a chance to play with Black Sabbath, Alice Cooper, Gary Moore, Kiss. I know I'm missing one or two there. He got to play with these real heavies, which is just nuts when you sit and think about it, right? I mean,
it's awesome. I mean, to have that kind of portfolio is pretty cool.
Be able to do it. So talk to me about how you got together with Mr. Donovan.
Oh, I didn't really know Jim that well before 2015. I knew of him, of course, because he's a Pittsburgh guy. Yeah. So am I. So I knew of him, but I didn't know him well. But I guess what had been happening was he was out of Rusted Root for about a decade.
Yeah.
And he was laying low, I guess, for a while. And all that time, he was writing songs and playing guitar, and wanted to come out front and do this. So he had this band, the Sun King Warriors, I think around 2013 or 14. But my guess is at that time it was more jammy and not as structured as it is now. So around 2014 or 15, I get a direct message from him out of the blue. Hey, Joe, this is Jim Donovan. I'm like, yeah, man, what's going on? He says,
that's cool.
He says, I'm putting a band together. I said, okay. He said, I would want to know if you're interested in playing drums in it. And I'm like, Jim, you're a drummer, aren't
joke?
You? Yeah. I'm like, Jim, this guy's the drummer I just saw you on a video.
That's awesome.
So I said, Jim, you're a drummer, right? He said, are we doing like a Santana thing or like an old Doobie Brothers double drums thing, or what are we doing? He said, no, I'll be out front. I've got these songs written. I'll be singing. I need a drummer. I'm like, oh. And at the time, I was playing a lot of gigs, but I was playing a lot of private functions.
Sure.
A lot of gigs for high-end wedding receptions, and a lot of gigs with like convention center stuff, which were big gigs and were awesome gigs with killer musicians. But it was all private stuff.
Right.
So I had been doing that for a long time, and that gets old.
Well, sure.
So Jim offers me this, and he says, "Are you interested?" I said, "Absolutely, I'm interested." He said, "Where do you live?" He comes over to the house a couple days later with a guitar amp, and just him and me. I shake his hand. He's in my basement, and we go over 3 or 4 songs that he had sent me. and we played them down. And he's like, "Yeah, you sound great." And I'm like, "Thanks, man. You too." I said, "I like these tunes." He said, "Listen, if we do this, it'll be X amount of gigs. It'll be about this many." He said, I'm hoping this works out. I said, "Okay, great." He left, and a couple of weeks later, I was doing a show with him at St. Francis University.
How about that?
And I'm talking show up, shake hands with everybody in the band. "Hi, how are you? I'm Joe." And playing these tunes. I had rehearsed as much as I could with the songs he had sent me.
Right.
So we played that gig at St. Francis, and that was end of, I forget. That was summer of 2015 or summer of 2016.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
Okay.
And I've been playing with him ever since. Incredible. Because there's still a lot of support that Jim has from Rusted Root fans and all that. So it's just great. Meeting all the guys in the band, meeting all of the people surrounding the band. It's a big family. And the shows we do, we played with the Clarks a few times.
Oh, yeah.
So fun.
Scott's been on the show.
Yeah, awesome. I'll have to check it out. But great guys to work with. And I had never played a place like Stage AE before for 4,000 people or 5,000 people. I had never played a place like the Palace Theater in Greensburg for 1,200 people. I'd never played any of that kind of stuff before. Right. But it was long overdue, and I just ate it up, and I'm still eating it up today, just the chance to play in front of larger crowds, which we do at least a few times a year. Now, we play clubs too. We play the casino, and we do smaller gigs as well. But the big shows, man, what a thrill.
I bet.
What a thrill. So, plus the chance to play original music as opposed to covers.
Absolutely.
So, and we work on that, during our rehearsals. It's really cool the way that Jim does his original music. It's not standard arrangement.
Right.
It doesn't. It's like so hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that you don't have to do the standard arrangement of
it's refreshing,
a typical cover song. You can write whatever you want.
Exactly.
It's like it had to be
exactly
drilled into my head. And Jim's a drummer, so we've talked about this again. I'm driving the band. I'm driving the band, and we don't want any drumming to be mushier in the background. We want it driving, and he gets that. So this whole thing about having two drummers in the band, it's awesome to me. It's actually a total advantage.
Has to be pretty cool though too.
It's crazy,
and it's a hell of a compliment to you that he chose you because his craft is drumming.
Yes, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that, and that's just something I'll always be thankful for.
Talk about this album. This crazy, very crazy is kind of a weird way to put it, but a very eclectic and very groovy record here.
That one right there, huh?
This one right here.
Okay, so that album
has your name on it, pal.
It does. Not a lot of drummers.
Sympathy and criticism.
Yeah, sympathy and criticism. Not a lot of drummers do solo albums. I was in.
Why not?
Well, yeah, exactly. Why not? I can tell you it's a big expense, and it's very difficult to get all the musicians together and all that. So it is tough.
Sure.
But I was in a position to finally finish this in 2015. I'm not kidding you. I started working on this album probably somewhere around 2001. It finally came out in 2015.
That's a labor of love.
Difficult it was. That album is like... my friend Max Leake, a great jazz pianist, he has this album, and he said, "Oh, Joe, it's like snapshots of your career," and he's so right. There's music on that album from the mid '90s with Doug Corey singing when I was in a band with him back then, and there's stuff on there from 2015.
Yeah.
So on that album, it makes no sense as far
20
as
years.
Yeah, as far as marketing or demographics, this album makes no sense. Zero. I mean, it's got inspirational stuff. It's got It's got straight ahead jazz. It has blues. It has pop rock. It has experimental. It has everything. So I've had people listen to this record and come to me and say, Joe, what the hell is this? Like, it doesn't
have a theme.
It doesn't have a theme at all. It's like Max said. Right. It's snapshots. But I got the chance to play with some of the best musicians in the country on this record, including Scott Anderson, who played on it and engineered a lot of it. Sean McDonald engineered a lot of this too, but Nick DeBattiste is playing guitar, Joe Monroe and Scott Anderson playing keys. On bass, this album has Kurt Lawrence and Randy Venturini and Brian Stahersky. I mean, holy cow. It's crazy. Again, Pete Hewlett sings Georgia, which the way he sings it is just insane. Erica Vasquez is singing on it too. And Maureen Budway is on it. I mean, there's just nothing better than that. Nothing better than that. So
it's dedicated to her.
It is dedicated to her. And, why not? I mean, playing with her was just one of the biggest honors of my career ever, doing shows with her. So I was awesome to be able to figure out a way to get her on this record. And Dave Budway was super supportive too, because I asked him if I even could, and he said absolutely. So I sent him the track. He approved it, and then Scott and I put it on the record.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's that. So that album is a fold open because even though it's a CD, I tried to make it as much of a...
He's trying to emulate a gatefold cover of an album when he was a kid.
Yes. If you could imagine,
right?
Like...
gatefold, maybe.
When Frampton Comes Alive, right? Something to bring home and something to read.
What a live record that was.
Yeah. So... I wanted something obviously tangible, but that also kind of read and kind of is like an old school album.
And I love the appreciation that you have for liner notes and explanations and credit.
Yes.
And all of that goes into the presentation, which is refreshing because you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, it isn't. That's so true. And man, it's such a team effort. Even a solo record is a team effort. It is, and that's what the back of the record is. It's just describing that, is that who all I couldn't get into everyone here, but
that's all right.
It's insane who all put in some time and put in some effort to making an album like that happen.
Sympathy and criticism, where did that come from?
Well, that's not one of the songs or anything. There's no title track, but the idea behind it. It's a very fine line in life. The difference if you have a hard time with something, or if you have a setback, or you have something that isn't your best, people will look at you in a certain way, and whether they like you or whether they don't like you is what will get you sympathy or will get you criticism for screwing up. Right. So when you screw up, and Lord knows I have, that fine line between what causes that reaction to be so conditional is in general where that name came from. Trying to dig in a very introspective way as to, socially, what causes someone to enjoy your failure and then dump all over you because of it, or what causes them to see your failure or your shortcoming and say, oh, I feel so bad for him. Oh, is there anything I can do for you? And it's this whole thing like, okay, is it sympathy or is it criticism? Which one are you giving me based on either of these occurrences? And how does that change conditionally from person to person?
Interesting.
So that's
very
kind of
esoteric.
I would like to think so. I've fought it my whole life, and I've always just been real sensitive to it. So that seemed to be a great name for the record. Scott Anderson and I had a lot of fun with that, because we would make up all these names during the engineering of the album that played off of those two words. It really got pretty ridiculous, but yeah.
The album is for the actual album. The CD and the liner notes, the package is available for sale.
Yes,
that's correct, and that's CD Baby.
CD Baby. Yeah,
but you can download the album.
Yeah,
anywhere.
That's one of the last actual physical copies that I even, I mean, it barely anyone
I'm
even
not
has
getting it back,
Yeah, go.
Sorry, pal.
You know what? Do you have a CD player?
Yeah, I got a CD
Okay,
player.
I don't.
Really?
Well, I hate to say it, but like Sign of the Times, and my car doesn't have one anymore, like a lot of people.
I don't know if my new one does or not. I got to think about that.
Exactly.
My prior one did.
So unless you have an old school CD player,
I have it at home.
There
I
you
still
go.
play them at home all the time.
I don't even have that anymore.
That's my last bastion. I mean, CDs were, what a compromise going from albums to CDs because you'd lost all the great readable material. Some of it was retained, and the booklets just got shrunk, and you needed bifocals even at 25 years old to read the damn thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it is a shame. I definitely missed that. But,
yeah.
Did you have fun?
I really did.
Yeah.
Killer.
Did you extrapolate?
No question.
Yeah,
I
went down a few rabbit holes.
Yeah, some pretty deep ones.
That's
But
good.
I guess that's the whole point of it, right?
That is the point of
No
it, man.
doubt.
You gonna come back and see me again?
Yeah, well...
You promise.
Absolutely. Listen, with the idea of the other office being over there, I think this would be really good because Jim definitely wants to come and do this as well.
Yeah, when he's ready. Yeah,
so
when he's ready.
we definitely will. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah,
but we will definitely do
and we're
it.
talking about Jim Donovan here, by the way. We would love to get on for a podcast. Whatever arrangement Jim is comfortable with, we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
We can't do the remote thing. It's not what we do, but we have multiple suites here and things we can do.
Sure.
Love the opportunity to do that.
No doubt.
I wish you the best, my friend.
Thank you,
You're one
sir.
hell of a talent, and I just really enjoyed talking music with you. This is the first time on this show that I've really been able to do some deep dive on some rock music that both of us
are there
area
with.
we came from. We're there, and you being a prolific drummer, and that me having a little bit of that bent growing up. There was just it was an amazing time to be alive. I say that now, and people say in Pittsburgh it was great because the Steelers, the Pirates in the 70s. I get it.
Oh, yeah.
But for me, that window of music and having my 10-year-old, 15-year-old mind be so like a sponge. And there was so much good stuff.
No question about it.
And
it shapes you. At that age, you're so impressionable.
Yeah.
And we were lucky to be alive at that age, soaking up that music.
Yeah,
no doubt
question about that. But thank you, Joe. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Eric.
And
That's a great time, man.
We'll see you again, man.
Awesome.
All right, friends. We are...
Where am I waving to? Here?
Over here. It's good. Anything. You guys like
Yeah.
a million cameras in here.
Okay.
We are out.